we're going to be talking about here is word problems and what the slope means and why it's important in the context of word problems. So we're going to be looking at some graphs to begin with, and then a word problem in example number 3, and talking about what the slope means. In order to do this, it's really important to remind yourself that slope means change in y over change in x. And in the case of word problems, we're going to be looking at the units of y on top of the units of x. Let's look at the first problem. We have a graph that's called distance to home, and there's a point here that's at 0, 2, and we have a point here, looking at my scale, looks like that's 2/3, 0. And I knew that because it was 3 lines to get up to 1. So there's 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Okay, so if I wanted to calculate the slope, I would do change in y over change in x. So change in y would be 0 minus 2 over change in x. 2/3 minus 0. 2 over 2/3. Dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So that's 2 times 3/2. The 2's cancel out, and my slope number is 3. Now I have to be careful because this slope is decreasing. It's going down as I move from left to right. So these should in fact be a -3 for my slope. You might have noticed that on the numerator, 0 minus 2, I should have a negative right there. Okay, so my slope is -3. What on earth does that mean? Well, let's attach some units to it. Units on y were miles, units on x were hours. So -3 miles per hour. Well, keep in mind this graph represents the distance away from home. So what is happening is my distance is getting smaller at a rate of 3 miles per hour. Otherwise, you could think of it as this person is walking towards his or her home. They're moving at a rate of 3 miles per hour. So the distance decreases by 3 miles per hour. Let's look at another one. Now I have a graph where it's called snail speeds, and on my y-axis it's meters traveled, my x-axis is minutes. So if I wanted to look at the slope, it goes to the point 0, 0, so I'm just going to count rise over run. Let's see. My rise is 3, the run there is 2, so my slope number is positive 3 over 2. Let's add some units to it. Units on y are meters, units on x are minutes. So something is 3/2 meters per minute. Let's talk about what that could mean in the context of a snail. 3 meters every 2 minutes. Or if you want to think of it in terms of a mixed number, you could think of it as 1.5 meters per minute. That's how fast the snail's speed is. The snail is going either, you could think of it as 1.5 meters per minute or 3 meters every 2 minutes. That's what the slope tells me. One last problem. This one doesn't have a graph. It says the population of Boringville in the year 2000 was 200,000 individuals. In the year 2010, it was recorded at 180,000 individuals. What does the slope tell us? Okay, well, I need to do change in y over change in x, but I don't really have points of x and y. Well, x is going to be the independent variable. In this case, I'm going to call that the year. You could also do years since 2000. And then the y value would be the population. That's the dependent variable. So 2010, 180,000. I could use those points. Another way I could do it would be to use times 0, I have 200,000, and then 10 years later, times 10, I have 180,000. Either of these will give me the same answer for slope. Let's calculate it. I'm going to use this first group because my guess is that's the one that's most common here. Oops. My first group meaning this guy's here. Okay, so I'm going to do y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, simplifying on top, I have -20,000. The bottom, I have 10. Reducing that, I'm getting -2,000. Okay, that's what my slope is, -2,000. But remind yourself what those units are. My y units on top of x units. Y units was number of people, or individuals, and my x units was years. So what's going on is my slope, or my change in population, remember slope represents change, is -2,000 individuals per year. That tells me that in Boringville, people are leaving the town, or the population is declining at a rate of 2,000 individuals per year. The negative tells me it's declining. So these word problems really can show you a lot of information about a relationship between two variables. In particular, the slope tells you about the change, what's changing, and the rate at which it's changing.